Hello everyone, this is part 12 of What If Naruto Made the Ultimate Sacrifice, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Naruto yawned as he jumped through the forest on the way back to Konoha. He had spent the past 2 weeks waking up very early during the morning and spending the time training. He jumped onto the ground before making his way to the clearing where Konoha's gates became visible. However, he stopped when he saw the strange sight in front of him. Numerous people were being escorted by shinobi into Konoha, only stopping briefly to have their papers examined. He scratched his head before making his way past all of them and towards the front of the line where Shiranui Genma and Namiashi Rado were helping with the proceedings. Oi, Genma-sensei. Naruto greeted the senbon-chewing shinobi as he nodded. Naruto, how can I help you? He rolled the senbon needle in his mouth to the other side as he spoke. Naruto observed the crowd of people before looking back towards the shinobi. What's going on? Genma finished checking the papers of a family before letting him through. You don't know, huh? Naruto had a clueless expression which answered the shinobi's question. Rado, who was silent, answered in between dealing with the civilians. Kakashi-san is free, he'll fill you in on the situation. Naruto scratched his head as he observed the surroundings to find the masked pervert. Yo, over here. The voice made him turn around to face the shinobi who was calmly leaning against a wall. Naruto looked at the busy shinobi who were occupied with the crowd and then at Kakashi who was standing and reading his mature novel. Shouldn't you be helping? Kakashi detached himself from the wall before walking up to the Jinchuriki. They can handle it, let's go. Naruto followed the Junin into Konoha as he stretched his arms. So, what's with all the people? Kakashi turned a page in his book before answering. According to your information, Madara wanted to wipe out all unworthy civilizations in his eyes. It seems he has begun. Naruto's eyes widened. Nani? Kakashi's exposed eye was fixated on his book. 2 weeks ago, Takagakure was attacked. It's been wiped out completely along with the rest of Waterfall Country. Naruto had a shocked expression. It was him. Kakashi nodded. We don't have eyewitnesses, but neighboring villages close to the border with retired shinobi claimed they felt a demonic chakra. It could only be him. Naruto looked over his shoulder at the gates of Konoha as they continued walking. You said they were wiped out, then who are they? They both turned into an alley away from the busier streets of Konoha. They are from Wind Country. After the attack, we informed other villages of the threat. The best form of defense we have is to unite and stand our ground. Due to this, smaller villages like Kasagakure and Omegakure have evacuated and traveled to the larger villages along with the people of their country. Naruto absorbed everything he had been told. In our case, Sunagakure and the rest of their people joined us since we have an alliance. Kakashi nodded. Also, the Kazekage wanted to return after he heard of the attack on Takagakure. Sunagakure has only begun to re-establish itself and wouldn't stand a chance on its own, so we provided shinobi who traveled to Wind Country and escorted them here. At this time, the best thing for us is to join and fight together. Naruto realized the urgency of the situation. Why wasn't I told any of this? Kakashi sighed before closing his book. We didn't want to bother you with this. Only few people knew of the plans since we didn't want to raise an alarm amongst everybody. They stopped walking as Naruto folded his arms. Everyone's going to become suspicious, so it's not long before they have to be told. Kakashi tucked away his novel in the confines of his vest. They may grow suspicious, but they're not going to be told anything regardless of how much pressure they apply on the council or the Godime. As far as they are concerned, there is a threat to everyone, but they won't know it's Madara until the time is right. What's important is to build a solid defense and try to understand where exactly Madara may strike next. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. Everything's come to this. He shook his head. I'm going to go home and rest. The Jinchuriki took off towards his abode, leaving the masked Junin by himself. Kakashi turned around before his face drifted upwards and his eyes landed on the Hokage monument and in particular, on the visage of the Yondaime. I wasn't much help last time, but this time, it'll be different, sensei. XXXXXXXXXX. Sakura was sat at the desk of the Godime with several books strewn across it. She was busy reading through the scroll Temari had provided in order to find something that could help them. Tsunade was also reading through her own books in an attempt to find something. The past few weeks had been mentally exhausting, and so far they only had one thing to work off, and that was the Godaime's suggestion. Tsunade had worked up the idea of modifying her Sozo Saisei technique for Naruto. The principle remained the same, as in it would heal a tremendous amount, but they needed to adapt it suitably for Naruto. They needed to somehow block off the Kyuubi's chakra so it wasn't unwillingly released, as its toxic nature would do more harm than good. But due to the lack of control Naruto had, they needed to run that certain aspect from the outside, and the method to accomplish that was becoming difficult to find. Once the technique is accomplished, they would have enough time to reconstruct his chakra coils without him losing his life. However, they were desperately trying to find the missing link for the Sozo Saisei technique to work. A few feet away from the two kunoichi, Gaara stared through the window to the far gates where his people were entering. Did they panic? The Kazekige's question was directed at his reunited brother, who stood at the far end of the room. At first, but we were able to calm the situation. Gaara closed his eyes, appreciative of Kankuro's effort. It is going to be hard from this point forwards. Temari placed her battle fan on the ground before folding her legs and leaning back in her chair. There is strength in numbers. The red-haired Kage opened his eyes as he resumed looking over the village. Sakura's eyes became alert as she swiftly read through the piece of text in front of her. Tsunade Shisu. The Godaime looked up from her book towards her apprentice. What is it? Sakura placed the scroll in front of the Godaime and pointed towards what she was reading. I think I found it. Tsunade rapidly began to read through as her eyes began to water. She nodded before facing the kunoichi. Hi. Sakura had a large smile across her face and her eyes were brimmed with tears of happiness. Gaara turned to the kunoichi. You found a cure for him. Sakura nodded as she laughed joyfully. Hi, a mixture between kinjutsu and a medical operation. Tsunade folded the book she was previously reading before picking up the scroll and analyzing it. From what it seems, the procedure is going to be very long. We don't have time to waste with the current situation. I'm going to have to organize this accordingly so we can begin the process as soon as possible. Sakura understood as she rose from her seat in order to find the Jinchuriki. However, she stopped as the next instant two shinobis appeared in front of the Godaime. Mitarashi Anko and Morino Ibiki reporting. The two shinobi stood at attention as the Hokage faced them. Tsunade sighed. Did you find anything? After the destruction of Takagakure and Waterfall Country, the Godaime had deployed a team to travel there and try to find any hints as to where Madara may be going. Anko had a grim face. We didn't encounter any enemies, but we saw the remains. Ibiki coughed. Everything was decimated. It looked like hell. The Godaime sat back contemplating on what kind of power the Uchiha had at his whim. Any clues as to where he may go next? Anko gulped as she looked at the Hokage. We found tracks. He's heading in our direction. The blonde instantly sat up and s her hand on her desk. Nani? Anko, head to the gates and tell him to speed up the process. Anko nodded before disappearing while Tsunade addressed Ibiki. I need you to send out a message to all Junin and Chunin to gather at the stadium within the next half hour. Gaara addressed the torture specialist. Tell all Sunagakure shinobi to be present also. The scarred shinobi disappeared from his spot to complete his task while Tsunade looked back at the scroll. She sighed before her eyes traveled to her apprentice, whose face was overcome with worry. XXXXXXXXXX. Sasuke panted as he sheathed his kusanagi and stared at the damage he had done to the training ground. He had trained consistently in the same locale for an extensive amount of time now. He wiped the sweat from his forehead before sitting down on the ground. The training schedule mostly involved him practicing his jutsu in order to become more efficient in implementing them and kenjutsu training. Moving his hand to the pouch on his leg, he withdrew a soldier pill before flicking it into his mouth. Ignoring the sour taste, he felt a boost of energy before grinning. His eyes twitched as he turned around, feeling a faint force of chakra. The Uchiha rose to his feet as he focused himself to garner a better understanding of what he was feeling. His mouth fell open as he realized the familiarity, that chakra. Abandoning his training, he took off rapidly to the source. He could see the boundary of the village drawing near, knowing of the fact that he was restricted to the village and wasn't allowed to leave. The black-haired teen brushed away the thoughts before jumping over the wall and into the trees behind it. Sasuke continued jumping through the trees as the distance between him and Konoha grew greater before eventually coming to a stop and landing on the forest floor. He calmly waited with his eyes alert as he analyzed the surrounding area. So, you're the one he left alive. The sinister voice made Sasuke divert his attention to the branch of a tall tree several feet away to find a man in an Akatsuki cloak sitting down coolly. Sasuke glared at the new arrival with hatred. Uchiha Madara. The crimson-eyed criminal rested his elbow on his knee. You can recognize the similar chakra. Sasuke's hand slowly made its way to his Kusanagi. You're the reason for all my suffering, that damn scroll which led to me losing everything. Madara raised an eyebrow. You know full well of the powers the Sharingan can grant. Tell me, why did you let the Jinchuriki live when you had the chance to obtain the Mangekyo? Sasuke's eyes fell to the forest floor. The darkness has no right to take away the light. Madara shook his head. Pitiful, you are bound by useless emotions. You lack the hatred to take the final step. Sasuke gritted his teeth as his black eyes changed into the form of the Sharingan. I refuse to become like my brother, like you. The only thing I lack is contentment. Sasuke vanished from his position, appearing directly in front of Madara before making a downwards S with his Kusanagi. Madara moved out of the way as the tree branch was sewn cleanly into two pieces. Both Uchiha continued the descent to the ground as Madara moved his head to the side at the last moment, avoiding the attack, before kicking the younger shinobi in the stomach and separating them both. Sasuke turned in the air before landing on his feet and charging at his ancestor. He began to attack the criminal with various moves before trying to take off his head with a horizontal swipe. Madara ducked under the attack as Sasuke smirked, twisting his wrist and bringing the hilt of his sword down into the orange-haired criminal's head. He didn't stop as he jumped forwards and drove his knee into Madara's face before twisting his body and delivering a kick into his neck, sending him through the air. The cap at the bottom of Sasuke's weapon fell off before he threw the Kusanagi at the soaring Madara. As it flew through the air, a wire escaped it before Madara crashed into a tree and the Kusanagi went straight into his cloak, pinning him. The younger Uchiha grabbed the wire before it sizzled and a current flowed across it towards Madara. The crimson-eyed criminal raised an eyebrow as the current reached the Kusanagi and decimated the tree he was pinned to. Sasuke pulled back the wire as his Kusanagi came into view from behind the dust cloud and into his hand. He held it in a ready position while he was fully alert. I know it missed, stop hiding. He heard a laugh from behind him as he instantly turned around to face Madara. The criminal held his shoulder before stretching his neck. Very innovative, your speed is amazing. The black circles in his eyes changed shape into the Sharingan, but, you're still no match for me. The leader of Akatsuki jumped at Sasuke, driving his leg into the younger shinobi's ribs before turning upside down and kicking him in the shoulder. Madara twisted onto his feet before throwing a combination of punches at his opponent. Sasuke reeled from the multiple punches as they connected. He brought up his sword as he felt some bi flowing from out of his mouth before concentrating his chakra. Madara threw a punch at the black-haired teen's stomach as a shock of electricity flew through his body upon connecting. Madara coughed out bi as he grew angry. He avoided the next attack by Sasuke before grabbing his arm and disarming the Kusanagi. He pulled in the shinobi and drove a violent punch into his stomach. Not stopping, he threw Sasuke away from him before kicking his Kusanagi hardly and sending it into a tree far away. Sasuke twisted before rapidly performing hand seals and shouting, Kaiten Heisukisho. Madara took note of his actions, instantly copying them as they both blew out a cloud of heated ash at each other. Sasuke spat out some bi from his mouth as he landed on the ground and attempted to find his opponent since the ash had obscured his view. The older shinobi didn't waste any time as he punched Sasuke repeatedly in his back before moving around him and kicking him across the face. Sasuke was sent rolling across the floor as he gritted his teeth trying to ignore the pain. As soon as he could, he jumped onto his feet before performing hand seals and raising his hand into the air, Kessenbai. A charge of electricity swirled around his raised arm before a ball of the volatile element appeared in his hand. The unpredictable ball of electrical energy shot multiple bolts around the Uchiha as they connected and destroyed the trees and earth. Sasuke roared as he put more chakra into his attack and it increased in ferocity. Several bolts hit the surrounding environment repeatedly, destroying everything they touched. XXXXXXXXXX. Genma and Rado ushered in as many people as they could as shinobis rushed over the village, either getting in positions for defending the village or helping to evacuate the people. The Anbu had mobilized and were already in their assigned locales as Genma anxiously looked over the huge crowd. Rado, there's no time for this, just let him through. Rado nodded as he stepped aside and told the people to get moving as fast as they could in an orderly manner. Follow the shinobi to where he takes you. He pointed at the ninja he was referring to. Come on people, hurry up and get moving. Anko used her energy to encourage the crowd. Genma's sweat dropped as he cleared his throat before speaking. Anko-san. The purple-haired kunoiki had a serious face as she waved him off. Don't worry, I can handle this fine. Move people. Genma decided to remain quiet as he turned around to find the Godime approaching him along with her apprentice and the Sand trio. The blonde Hokage spoke in an authoritative tone. Any suspicious activities? Genma shook his head. No, most of the squadrons have taken the positions and we'll be on our way once we've made sure the rest of the people are in safely. Tsunade turned around to face her pink-haired apprentice. Find Naruto quickly and try to convince him. Once you're done, I need you back here to provide medical care since you can't fight in your condition. Sakura nodded, but before she took off, the ground trembled, causing the crowd of people to panic, wondering what was going on. A huge chakra made itself felt as the shinobi looked towards the direction it was coming from to find explosions in the distance followed by a large plume of smoke rising into the air. Tsunade's eyes widened. He's here. XXXXXXXXXXX. Sasuke was slightly out of breath as he looked around through the cloud of smoke and dust. He brought his hand down to his side, remaining alert of his surroundings as he used his other hand to withdraw a kunai from his pouch. He twisted the kunai in his hand before something caught his attention out of the corner of his eye. He turned towards it, however his eyes widened as he saw a kunai flying directly towards his head. The Sharingan wielder's insides twirled in fear as he realized he wouldn't be able to stop it from connecting. He waited resignedly as the world seemed to slow down while the weapon made its way towards his temple. Nonetheless, within an inch of connecting, a clanging sound was heard as the weapon was thrown off course courtesy of another kunai. Sasuke brought his own kunai into a ready position as he realized what had happened. Another man landed next to him with long white hair and a serious demeanor. That was a close call for you. The smoke slowly cleared as the shinobi patiently waited for their enemy to make an appearance. A laughing sound was heard as Madara revealed his voice. You have certainly grown, Jiraiya. The perverted hermit directed his attention to the source of the voice to find the old Uchiha staring directly at him and Sasuke. Shouldn't there be two of you? Madara sighed. He fulfilled the reason for his existence. Jiraiya realized what he meant by his words. Your own comrade. He disregarded the fact it seemed so low to K, someone who was loyal to you, as he voiced his opinion on more important issues. You're doing all this because of one boy. Do you really hate Yasuo so much? The crimson-eyed criminal slowly walked around the pair. I am doing this to bring the ideals of a shinobi back to what they should be. Jiraiya shook his head disbelievingly. The power to change others isn't given, it is earned. Madara laughed at the frog hermit. You have aged, and with it you believe you have acquired wisdom. You are still young compared to me, and my power was earned when I came my best friend. Sasuke's eyes were filled with rage as he heard the orange-haired criminal. This bloodline really is a curse. Madara's visage was emotionless. What is a gift? What is a curse? The perceptions of such things are twisted with each individual way of thinking. Over time, a person comes to accept that which he has grown accustomed to. Once I have completed my destiny, people will believe the new way of life is the most suitable way of living. Sasuke tightened his grip around the kunai in his hand. I lost my parents, my brother, my dreams because of you and what you think is an Uchiha's destiny. The swirls in his eyes connected into a whole new pattern, revealing the Mangekyo Sharingan. Those dreams, they were hard to get back. I won't lose them again. Jiraiya looked at the pattern in the younger shinobi's eyes as Madara raised an eyebrow. It seems you did have the will for these eyes. Sasuke gritted his teeth as he talked of his fight with Naruto. I gave up on obtaining these eyes the day I left my strongest bond intact. Madara smirked as he realized how he acquired the power of the Mangekyo. Your brother was dear to you until the end. The face of Itachi flashed through Sasuke's mind as he remembered his hand going through his chest and dealing the final blow which ended his life. I didn't want to ever have to use these, but until you die, the Uchiha will never be free of their past. Madara shook his head as he looked at the disappearing cloud of smoke in the sky, knowing that it must have alerted Konoha. We're going to have company soon. Enough playing around, it's time I show you what power really is. Jiraiya anticipated what was going to happen next as both he and Sasuke jumped behind one of the many fallen trees for cover. A blast of purple chakra was expelled from Madara's body, throwing over the few standing trees in the vicinity. His body began to glow a dark purple as he performed hand seals, and chains exploded from the ground. The seemingly full of life chains slowly wrapped themselves around the criminal's anatomy before pulling him into the ground. Sasuke looked at the sight in trepidation as he knew what was happening. Anima. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto sat up in his bed as he felt an enormous burst of chakra. The Jinchuriki recognized the demonic qualities as he jumped out of his bed before looking through the window. He was taken by surprise as he saw the surging chakra force emanating from the distance. Madara. He turned around before running to the side of his bed and grabbing the weapons pouch which was returned to him by Sasuke. He looked inside to make sure everything was there before he strapped it to his leg. Before leaving, his eyes caught the black book sitting comfortably on the table. He walked up to it before picking it up and momentarily looking at it. Pocketing it, he exited his apartment before jumping onto his roof to get a better view of the strange happening in the distance. The sky was a dark red as the clouds began to circle around where the huge chakra was pouring from. Naruto's sapphire eyes focused on the vicinity where he could feel it coming from before the ground began to tremble along with his apartment. He steadied himself as his astonishment was clearly written across his face when he saw what happened next. A scream was heard before something burst out of the ground in the distance, making itself known to all of Konoha. Naruto was amazed at the display as he saw Anima in all its glory. It looked exactly like the statue at the Akatsuki hideout and was bigger than even Gamabunta. The purple chakra surrounding the king of the underworld flared as he struggled with the chains binding his hands. After a few moments they were broken as he spread his arms in a menacing manner and let out a roar. The people on the streets of Konoha noticed the tremendous sight before screaming in fear and running to take cover. Naruto turned his head, his eyes traveling to the Hokage monument as he looked at the face of the Shodaime, the one who had taken in his ancestor and sacrificed his life to protect his precious person. He looked at the Nadaime, who had died in the war alongside his grandparents to protect the Fire Country. As he felt his heart calm down, his eyes laid their attention on the Sandaime, who was the one to give him acknowledgement and never stop believing in him. He sighed as he looked at the visage of the Yondaime, who was the one who chose him to bear the burden of the Kyuubi and gave his life for the happiness of his people. Finally, he stared at the carved countenance of the Godaime, who was one of the most important people alive to him and carried the duty of protecting Konoha with her life. The words of Madara flowed through his head as his eyes were full of determination. This is your destiny. When you were chosen as the container of the Kyuubi, your fate was sealed. He brought his hand in front of his face as he stared at it before letting it fall to his side. He closed his eyes as he tightened both of his hands into fists. With these hands, he opened his eyes as he stared at the demonic Ani in the distance. I'll change my destiny. The king of the underworld towered over the landscape with his dominating presence. The purple chakra enshrouding the Ani flared as his 8 eyes blinked before he brought his freed arms closer to his torso. Only the upper part of the beast was visible as the rest seemed to remain hidden behind the ground. Jiraiya ran a hand through his hair as he looked over the land which had been demolished. The luscious vegetation which was known to surround Konoha was no longer visible in the direct vicinity, as the incredible force of Anima had obliterated everything, leaving it looking like a plain wasteland. He turned to his right towards the only other person present. Are you prepared for this? The dark atmosphere didn't distract Sasuke as his eyes were focused on his transformed ancestor. He gave his answer in the form of a nod as the clouds above circled their location. The two shinobi became alert as Anima raised his clawed hand before bringing it down rapidly towards them. Both ninja jumped in opposite directions as the huge fist connected into the ground, decimating it and causing dust and debris to fly everywhere. Jiraiya rolled before coming to his feet and biting his thumb, drawing B. He proceeded to S it into the ground, Kuchio's no jutsu. A large plume of smoke engulfed the area before clearing to reveal Jiraiya standing on a humongous red toad. The toad boss took out the pipe from his mouth before blowing some smoke. This situation brings back familiar memories. Jiraiya steadied himself on the summon's head. Fight with me, old friend, just like you did with the Yondaime 16 years ago. Gamabunta brought his hand to rest on the hilt of his blade. Anima, he is a legend even to me. The duo jumped towards their adversary to engage him in battle as Sasuke smirked. He did the familiar procedure before his own hand into the ground. After the ensuing smoke cleared, the slithering from of a large snake colored in a pure black became visible. The summon thrashed the end of his tail before raising his head into a ready position. His eyes were a golden yellow with black slits and his face had red markings, heading from his mouth to his head. Sasuke took a deep breath as he addressed the huge beast. It's time, Kurozen. Lend me your help. The snake summon hissed before speaking in his deep voice. Finally, you give me a chance to play. He gave a pleased laugh as he finished speaking. The large beast drove forwards at a fast pace towards Anima as Gamabunta jumped out of the way, avoiding a hard fist. Sasuke held on tightly as Anima recognized the approaching enemy and his hand into the ground, causing it to ripple and tear. Move around it. The Uchiha's command was answered with a snort. Kurozen slithered rapidly, avoiding the debris before answering back. Imbecile, what need is there to point out the obvious? The Uchiha on top of the prideful beast remained quiet, knowing that it wouldn't help the situation to make a retort. The duo once again took off in the direction of Anima as Gamabunta continued to strike at the demonic Ani with his sword, only to have it deflected by his powerful hands. Jiraiya tried his hardest not to fall off the huge toad as the battle continued. Gamabunta jumped over the huge demon, landing on the other side, before looking back and opening his mouth, shooting a large amount of oil. Jiraiya reacted instantly, performing hand seals and shooting a large ball of fire from his mouth and thus igniting the oil as it impacted against Anima. After having either combined Kate and Gamayu Enden technique, Gamabunta launched himself at the demon. He brought down his sword to strike the demon's temple but was shocked as a slight movement later, it was caught in one of Anima's fearsome hands. The toad boss struggled, attempting to break free, however Anima raised his free hand and rapidly sent it towards Gamabunta. Jiraiya's eyes widened as he saw the oncoming attack. He saw a flash of black as Kurozen wrapped himself tightly around the forearm of Anima, stopping his movement. He proceeded to dig his teeth into the skin of the king of the underworld as Sasuke abandoned his perch on top of his summon and began to run up the arm of Anima directly towards his face. The Uchiha's hand began to crackle with the element of lightning as he prepared the Chidori before jumping at the head of Anima and targeting one of his 8 eyes. Moments before his attack connected in the eye that he was targeting, it turned directly towards him and the pupil sparkled before throwing out a chakra blast which sent Sasuke soaring through the air. Kurozen realized the danger the Uchiha was in as he let go of Anima's arm and raced towards Sasuke to stop him from making contact with the hard ground. Anima tightened his hand into a fist as it became free before rapidly driving it into Gamabunta's face and sending him rolling, much to the dismay of Jiraiya, who was flung onto the ground due to the force. Sasuke fell through the air, approaching the ground at an increased pace as he clutched his stomach, reeling from the agonizing pain flowing through him after feeling the simple chakra blast. He looked towards the ground as some bee began to trickle onto his chin before Kurozen slithered right under him and opened his mouth, catching him on his soft tongue. Sasuke sat up, gritting his teeth before jumping onto the beast's head. Kurozen directed his attention back towards Anima, who was bringing one of his hands to the guard in his mouth. He didn't even feel my poison or my bite. Anima clutched the mouth guard before ripping it out and displaying his sharp teeth. He let go of the large mouth guard as it fell towards the ground and caused a crater upon landing. The king of the underworld began to laugh slowly before speaking in a menacing voice which was familiar to the sound of Madara's. Your power is so pathetic, it is amusing. Jiraiya rose to his feet before making his way over to Gamabunta, who was slowly getting into an upright position. Without his pipe in his mouth, he hits hard. Jiraiya jumped onto the toad's head as they prepared to fight again. We'll hit harder. XXXXXXXXXX. Tsunade ran across the land along with several of Konoha's shinobi as they approached the fierce battle being waged. She looked towards her right at an Anbu adorning a mask. Tenzu, I want everyone to provide support from a distance. Don't try to engage directly. Tenzu nodded before falling back to one of his subordinates and proceeding to tell him to inform the rest of the shinobi. Gaara remained quiet as he continued on his way, his thoughts on what he was about to face. The emotionless face of the young Kage starkly contrasted from what he was feeling on the inside as he attempted to conjure up any tactics which would help him. Kakashi had a serious demeanor as he put his hand in front of him before a strong wind rushed past the shinobi, courtesy of the battle. His thoughts were in no confusion as he knew exactly how far he was willing to go. Naruto's friends all took off in different directions as they arrived at the scene of the battle, drawing various weapons in order to provide help from a distance. Kakashi pulled up his forehead protector, revealing his Sharingan before making his way directly into the battlefield and towards Anima. Tsunade looked towards the Junin, knowing what he was doing before she looked at the summoned beasts relentlessly combating with Anima. She bit her thumb, drawing a trickle of B. My turn. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto jumped across the rooftops of Konoha, fast approaching the gates as the people below were beginning to calm down and being led by shinobi to a safe shelter. His sapphire eyes were focused on the beast in the distance as he could also see the forms of a toad, snake and slug engaged in battle. Naruto. The cry for his name made him look to his left as he saw Sakura approaching him. He stopped as the kunoichi advanced and caught up to him. Sakura-chan, I don't have time. The Jinchuriki was about to leave but was halted when the medic grabbed his wrist. I need to talk to you. Sakura looked at Naruto, whose eyes showed signs of urgency as he stared back. The blonde sighed. Fine, what is it? Sakura looked towards the ground as she spoke. We found you a cure. Naruto's surprise was clearly written across his face. Nani? The kunoichi looked up at the Jinchuriki with clear signs of distress. Jiraiya-sama told us of your jutsu. Please Naruto, no matter what happens, don't use it. Naruto's mind was in haywire as he absorbed the new development. He looked towards Anima as he spoke in a soft voice. I might have no choice. Sakura let go of his wrist as she faced away from him. You promised? Naruto looked at her back as she resumed. You wouldn't leave me. The genin gave a resigned sigh, feeling despondent by the fact that he could survive if he didn't have to use the technique created by the pact between him and Kyuubi. He walked behind Sakura before wrapping his arms around her. As long as you don't forget me, his voice turned into a whisper as he finished. I won't ever leave you. Sakura understood exactly what his decision was as a tear trickled onto her cheek, before the warmth of being in Naruto's embrace disappeared. She turned around to find the Jinchuriki nowhere in sight, knowing he had taken off towards Anima. XXXXXXXXXX. Suten Bakusui Shoha. Kakashi spat out large amounts of water from his mouth as it raged and covered the area. He began to run across it towards Sasuke and his summon before jumping and landing next to the Uchiha. Kurozen rushed across the shallow water towards Anima as both shinobi simultaneously performed hand seals and shouted, Suten Daibakufu no Jutsu. The shallow water rose before charging at Anima and crashing into the demon. Gamabunta leapt into the air to prepare for an attack with his sword as Katsuyu along with Tsunade advanced towards the king of the underworld. The slug summon prepared her attack before opening her mouth, Zeshi Nensen. She spat out a potent acid directly at Anima, which landed on his arm, causing him to give an angry roar. Anima ignored the sizzling on his arm before waving his arm hardly in the direction of the descending Gamabunta, which resulted in the dangerous substance being thrown at the Toad Boss and his summoner. Gamabunta brought his sword in front of his face for protection as the acid landed on his hands, causing him to wince in pain. Jiraiya quickly performed hand seals before shouting, Suten Teppadama. He threw the ball of water from his mouth at the injured hands of Gamabunta as they managed to stop the potent acid from doing any more damage. Anima s his hand into the ground, causing part of it to be thrown into the air before proceeding to punch it in the direction of the shinobi throwing weapons at him from the distance. Tenten's eyes widened as she saw the large piece of earth closing in on her location as well as the others. Lee utilized his speed to grab the kunoichi before taking off as Neji readied himself. He began to spin slowly, Hakusho Kaiten. His spin increased in speed as he expelled chakra from all of his chakra points and created a shield from it. The piece of earth over 10 times his size contacted against the shield as it began to break away. Neji continued with his technique as sweat began to drop from his head, from the pressure being applied, before finally stopping as there was nothing remaining. He sighed, wiping the sweat away. That took a lot of chakra. The Hyuga turned around, relieved to find that the shinobi with him weren't hurt. Shikamaru scratched his head. Nothing's hurting him. Chujihu was in a focused state and had no food in his hand, nodded in agreement. How are we supposed to beat that? Kiba, along with Akamaru, ran across the battlefield as the Inuzuka looked at his companion, "Do it now, Akamaru." The large dog barked in response, rushing towards Anima and avoiding his fist before jumping past him and urinating on him. Anima roared in anger as Akamaru reunited with Kiba. The Inuzuka smirked before shouting, "Jinju Konbi Henge Sotaro." A burst of smoke filled the air before a large double-headed wolf emerged. The transformed Kiba and Akamaru rushed across the battlefield before beginning to spin rapidly and performing the Garoga technique. Anima put his hands into the ground as the attack approached before the earth in front of him exploded and large amounts of chains exited, capturing the two-headed wolf. He licked his teeth with his tongue before punching the captured prey, causing them to howl in pain. Gamabunta rushed in and intercepted the final blow with his sword as the transformation dispelled and Kiba fell towards the ground along with Akamaru. They were stopped from connecting as their fall was cushioned by bugs. Shino commanded his bugs to bring the bee Inuzuka and injured Akamaru towards himself. He picked up Kiba and put him around his shoulder and took off while his bugs followed with Akamaru in tow. The Kazekage looked on as everyone fought against Anima in an attempt to damage and defeat the seemingly invincible beast. Spreading his legs, he rapidly began to perform hand seals as large amounts of sand erupted from the ground, swirling. Having completed the preparation for his attack, he placed his hands in front of his face before speaking, "Yusa Bakuryu." The sand rose before rushing over the land towards his target like an avalanche. Gamabunta stopped his attack, noticing the oncoming avalanche. The Toad boss leapt out of the way as the other summons took a similar course of action. The thundering sand crashed into Anima, however it was incapable of burying the towering demon. It covered his anatomy up to his chest and also trapped his arms. Gaara put his hands into the sand, Sabaku Taiso. The shockwaves traveled through the sand, compressing everything. The young Cage looked on eagerly, wondering whether his attack was successful as Anima bellowed. "Fools!" The voice of Anima was enough for Gaara to realize that his attempt was ineffective as the ground began to shake. A shroud of chakra engulfed the demon before bursting outwards and throwing the sand everywhere. Gaara's expression changed into one of mild concern as the sand returned towards him like a wave of destruction. Sabaku Fuyu. A platform of sand formed underneath the red-haired teen before lifting him into the air. However, the approaching wave was too fast as Gaara prepared to defend himself. A strong wind encircled the cage as a cry filled the air, "Arakarukas." The wind twisted unremittingly, before exploding outwards and effectively warding the sand in a different direction. Gaara glanced back to find the familiar Jinchuriki standing on the sand platform along with him. Naruto grinned at the cage, "Looks like everyone started without me." He took on a more focused and stern demeanor before jumping off the sand platform and onto the ground. His eyes were set on Anima as he sighed heavily, relaxing himself and proceeding to take off. XXXXXXXXXX. The medical team near the gates of Konoha were hard at work, on the injuries many shinobi had sustained after only being in battle with Anima for a brief amount of time. Sakura ignored the screams of the male as she worked on the lacerations across his stomach. Having done most of the work, her hands took on a glow as she finished with the patient. She wiped away the sweat across her forehead, her mind lingering on Naruto no matter how much work was presented. She found that she was distracted constantly on what the Jinchuriki was planning to do. However, she also knew it was her duty to help the pained patients as a kunoiki of the leaf. "Sakura, I need your help with this one. We have to work quickly or we're going to lose him." Ino's concerned voice broke the pink-haired medic from her thoughts as she rushed over to the Yamanaka to assist. Shino arrived on location with Kiba over his shoulder while his bugs held Akamaru. He looked through numerous medics at work before making his way through them. What happened? The Aberrane looked to his right upon hearing the worried voice to find himself being approached by Inuzuka Hana, Kiba's older sister. Shino's demeanor remained calm. "Can you heal Akamaru? I'll take Kiba to a more experienced medic. His condition is critical." Hana had only been helping in preparing medicines as her veterinarian skills weren't required, but she now had the opportunity to put them to use. Shino's bugs let go of the dog and scurried back to their user as Hana began to work. Shino caught a glance of Sakura and Ino at work before making his way over to them. Ino finished wrapping the bandages around the severed leg of the shinobi as Sakura gave him a sedative. The pink-haired medic turned, only to stop in shock as she saw the battered form of the dog user, Kiba. Shino walked over to one of the spare tables and placed Kiba on it. I healed part of his wounds, but I don't know enough to heal him completely. Sakura nodded before speaking. Don't worry, you gave him enough time. Ino made her way over to aid. How's the battle going? Any progress? Shino remained silent before answering. We're losing, if anything. Shizune and Hinata rushed over to the Inuzuka. Hinata had a worried expression for her friend before placing one of her specially concocted medicines near him. This should help. Sakura nodded before sighing and beginning to work. The news of the losing battle made her worry return full force, as she knew Naruto would have no problems doing what he had to now. Shizune noticed the disturbed look in her eyes as she began to work. Sakura, we'll be fine without you. The kunoichi turned to the older medic. What are you trying to say? Shizune shook her head as she knew exactly why the kunoichi was so worried. You want to be with him, then go. We can handle it here. Most of the patients have been dealt with. Sakura looked at the ground before closing her eyes. Arigato. She took off, leaving the rest as they continued with their work. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto stopped at a safe distance from the raging battle as he performed his signature hand seal, Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Several pops of smoke occurred before 40 clones stood next to the Jinchuriki. Naruto reached into his pouch, taking out a scroll before opening it. He laid it across the ground before observing it. There were a total of 40 empty circles in the scroll as he bit his thumb and smeared the bee over the scroll. In the next instant, there were several plumes of smoke rising from the scroll as they revealed the special kunai used in conjunction with the Hiraishin no Jutsu. Naruto held out his hands as the wind around them began to materialize in the form of two swords. He nodded at his clones, who responded by picking up a three-pronged kunai each and rushing towards Anima. Naruto waited calmly for the E of his plan, hoping it would work. Sasuke coughed out B as he landed on the ground alongside Kakashi, while Kurosen attempted to recover from the O of fireballs Anima threw at him. The snake slithered over to his summoner as he slowly sat up, feeling the effects of the battle with the various C across his body. Sasuke panted before jumping onto Kurosen's head. It's not over yet. Kakashi smiled lazily behind his mask. Good to know you're not giving up. He brushed the dirt off his torn clothes and joined the Uchiha. The two shinobi halted their actions as they saw numerous clones of Naruto running towards Anima before throwing their kunai at the demon. Naruto looked on from a distance, before smirking and closing his eyes upon feeling the pull on his body. The Jinchuriki vanished from his position as Anima's anatomy was covered in multiple yellow flashes, with Naruto accompanying each one with a vicious attack of his weapons. The shinobi near the battlefield looked on in awe as they recognized the technique which was made famous by the Yondaime. The flashes of yellow went as quick as they came before Naruto's figure could be seen descending behind Anima. The king of the underworld was covered in gashes, but the minor wounds began to heal up before closing completely. Naruto gritted his teeth as he realized the failure of his attack as Anima gave off a burst of chakra, sending him soaring. The Jinchuriki twisted in the air as Gamabunta jumped underneath him and gave him something to land on. Jiraiya had a serious expression behind the bee covering his face. You finally made it. The frog hermit knew exactly what could happen as he tried to keep his mind off the worst possible outcome. Naruto stretched his arm as he looked at the bee form of his mentor. I should have come earlier. Jiraiya shook his head. Naruto, don't do something drastic. Naruto looked at Anima demolishing his clones, leaving none of them. I won't. The two shinobi stopped their conversation as they recognized a black serpent slowly wrap itself around Gamabunta's upper torso. The toad boss was less than impressed at the nerve of the snake. Get the hell off me. Sasuke spoke before Kurosen could make a retort. I need your help in getting closer. Kurosen can't move fast enough to avoid an attack in his condition. Jiraiya nodded at the toad boss as he took off with a gigantic leap right at Anima. Sasuke prepared his Mangekyo Sharingan, Amaterasu. Anima's head was ignited with black flames as he screamed in pain. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the T attack. He began to perform hand seals as he thought of an idea. Controlling the amount of chakra he put into his attacks so it wasn't excessive, he threw out his right hand, Yashikachu. The spherical shape of wind appeared around the head of Anima and caused the black flames to rage before they grew into a large ball. Sasuke raised an eyebrow as he saw what was happening before Naruto clasped his hand shut, causing the sphere of flames to implode and result in a huge explosion which sent them soaring from the demon. Gamabunta landed on his feet, steadying himself. Naruto looked at the attack in awe. I didn't expect it to be that huge. Kakashi held his arm which had been damaged from the explosion. We could have been K. Naruto scratched his head giving a nervous laugh. Hey, Gamen. Jiraiya waved off his apology as he eagerly waited for a clear view of Anima's head. It might have worked. I've seen those flames before. Their heat is strong enough to melt the thickest of earth and steel. Your technique just gave them a tremendous boost in power. Tsunade watched in shock at the fast display of power as Anima's head gave off smoke. They did it. Anima's body slowly began to fall before his hands landed on the ground, stopping him. Tsunade gave a despondent sigh as she realized the demon was still alive. She was taken by surprise as the ground around her and Katsuyu came apart before chains enveloped them both. Tsunade gave a pained cry as the chains began to crush her. Naruto clenched his fist as he shouted in worry, Tsunade Barken. The sharp chains extended before making their way into Anima's hands, who proceeded to swing the slug summon into Gamabunta. Naruto jumped off the Toad Boss along with the other shinobi and landed on the hard ground uncomfortably. The Jinchuriki quickly got back onto his feet as Gamabunta was forced onto the ground due to the impact of having Katsuyu thrown into him. Naruto frantically looked around to find Tsunade as he saw her form strewn across the plain a few feet away from the summons. He ran across the battlefield as Anima gave a maniacal laugh. Jumping past Kurozen, who was now no longer wrapped around Gamabunta, he arrived next to Tsunade. The blonde looked at the chains wrapped around the Godime before grabbing them and ripping them off. His hands became B as Tsunade winced in pain. Kuso. He picked up the unconscious form of the Hokage and avoided the numerous chains bursting from the ground which began to wrap themselves around the summons. Anima pulled the summons towards himself as they were suspended in the air in front of him, his hands beginning to glow a dark purple, Humurasaru. His arms became increasingly fast as he punched the summons repeatedly and ripped into them. Jiraiya looked on in shock as he knew the already tired Gamabunta wouldn't survive past that. Naruto landed next to the legendary Sannin with Tsunade in his arms, Ero Sennin. Jiraiya tore his eyes away from the frightening display and towards his student. He could see the hurt look in his eyes. Naruto, wait. Naruto closed his eyes. Don't, you know we don't stand a chance like this. He handed the unconscious Godime to the frog hermit. Get as far away as you can. Jiraiya sighed. I'm sorry. Naruto shook his head as he pulled out the black book he had taken a lot of care in writing. He placed it in Jiraiya's vest pocket. Don't be, he smiled at the frog hermit. I finished my story. Jiraiya nodded before turning to Kakashi and Sasuke. Let's go. Kakashi remained silent, understanding the situation, before both he and Jiraiya vanished from their positions. Naruto looked at the unmoving form of the Uchiha, Sasuke. Sasuke closed his eyes. I'm not going anywhere. Naruto looked at Anima who seemed to be slowing down as the summons battered forms were clearly visible. Leave. The Sharingan wielder tightened his hands into fists before opening his eyes. He walked past the blonde but stopped momentarily, like there's any chance someone, who can't save a friend could become Hokage. Naruto turned to face the Uchiha's back as he heard the same words he had uttered once. Sasuke's vision blurred as he finished. You did save me. Naruto had a bittersweet smile across his face as the Uchiha's form vanished. He looked back towards Anima who had finished his attack. The chains surrounding the summons fell to the ground as they disappeared in a large cloud of smoke. The Jinchuriki concentrated before he could feel the Kyuubi's presence within his mind. It's time. The Kyuubi responded calmly, which was unusual. You're going to feel my chakra leaving your coils. It's going to hurt, but it's supposed to happen. Naruto shook his head as he looked at the intricate pattern on his forearm. I'm ready. Naruto fell onto his knees as his body was engulfed in pain. He could feel his chakra coils weakened state as the Kyuubi's chakra rushed towards the seal on his forearm, causing it to grow and spread across his body. Naruto gritted his teeth as the patterns stopped at his neck before looking up at Anima. The king of the underworld was surging with chakra as he stared directly at the Jinchuriki. The genin took out a kunai before it across his forearm, drawing B which trickled over the seal. Anima pulled back his hand as a ball of purple chakra began to emanate from it. He released the volatile chakra in Naruto's direction with a sickening laugh. Naruto paid no attention to the incoming attack as he remembered the screaming form of his great-grandfather. Forming hand seals, he voiced the words to activate the technique created from his pact with the demon inside of him, Yasha Bijutsu Tenbatsu Anoyo Kyubi. His body instantly gave off a wave of red chakra which countered Anima's attack before it began to circle him. The fearsome chakra of the Kyubi rose into the air, taking the shape of the kitsune's head before roaring and rushing into the sky. XXXXXXXXXX. Jiraiya arrived at the sidelines of the battlefield along with Kakashi where numerous shinobi had been providing support from. Neji recognized their presence before looking back towards Anima where a cloud of smoke rose from close to him, signaling the departure of the summons. The Hyuga walked over to the legendary Sannin. What's going on? Jiraiya placed Tsunade on the ground as another voice answered, it's ending. Neji looked at Sasuke who had just arrived a few moments after Kakashi and Jiraiya. Tsunade coughed as she began to open her eyes, regaining consciousness. She sat up rubbing her head before she instantly became alert. Jiraiya put his hand on her shoulder stopping her. The Godime looked around before facing towards Anima and seeing the figure of Naruto near him. Don't tell me. Jiraiya nodded, he's going through with it. Shikamaru, who had remained quiet throughout their conversation, spoke what was on everyone's minds. What do you mean? Kakashi stared at the figure of Naruto. Self-sacrifice. He closed his eyes, like many before him. The Nara felt his insides twinge as he knew exactly what he meant by those words. Neji directed his white eyes in the direction of Naruto upon hearing the Junin as the Jinchuriki was on his knees. He is in pain. Tsunade Shisu. The shout caught the Godime's attention as she saw her apprentice approaching. Sakura stopped next to the busty blonde before looking around and noticing everyone present. She dreaded what might have happened as she looked towards Anima to find Naruto alone. The pink-haired Kunoichi was about to move but found herself being held back by the Godime. Tsunade let a tear escape her eye. This was his decision. The shinobis looked on in terror as they saw the face of the Kyubi before it rushed into the crimson sky. XXXXXXXXXX. The menacing chakra of the Kyubi began to form a circle in the sky before opening from the center and revealing a dark black behind it. Anima looked on curiously before speaking to Naruto. The Kyubi, you. Naruto smirked as he rose slowly with the chakra of the demon fox surrounding him. So much for creating your own civilization. He began to scream angrily as the rest of the chakra burst from him into the black hole in the sky and a rumbling covered the area. Huge balls of pure chakra escaped the black hole in the crimson sky speeding towards Anima and crashing into. The chakra of the Kyubi held Naruto in his position as the fireballs connected everywhere causing large amounts of damage. The form of Anima began to sizzle as the toxic chakra ripped apart his body slowly disintegrating all of his anatomy before his eyes began to close. The scroll inside of the mouth guard which had the contract between Anima and the first of the Uchiha was destroyed in the chaos. The carnage calmed down as Anima's form was ripped to shreds leaving the beaten body of Madara behind. Naruto had a faraway look in his eyes before coughing. Seeing the body of the Uchiha, he looked towards the sky where the Kyubi's chakra began to fade into the air. A few moments later, a flash of pink appeared in front of his eyes before Sakura looked at his beaten form. The Kunoichi picked up the blonde's head before resting it on her lap, the tears escaping her eyes as she struggled to control her voice. Barker. Sasuke walked past the Kunoichi, looking at Naruto before taking a seat on the opposite side. The Uchiha didn't say anything, instead calmly sitting next to his best friend. He placed a hand on the Genin's shoulder and gave him a smile. The rest of the shinobi arrived on the torn landscape which was drastically different from before. Jiraiya walked up to the beaten body of Madara observing the unidentifiable ninja. He shook his head in disgust before making his way over to his student. Gaara's face had a pained expression as he saw the broken body of the first one to give him acknowledgement. A tear escaped the Kage's eyes as Temari walked up behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Neji along with the rest of Naruto's friends who were present, didn't say anything as the Godime stood behind her student looking at the person who was the closest thing to family she had. She wiped the tears from her eyes trying to control her emotions. Naruto looked at everyone present through his fatigued eyes. There were familiar faces and those which he couldn't recognize, however they all held the same expression, the one of remorse. The feeling of contentment and peace entered his heart, lifting so much of the weight which had been placed on it. He closed his eyes with a smile on his face, resigning himself to the darkness as one last thought ran through his mind. I did it, Oji-san. Translation. Amaterasu, God of the Sun. Arakarukas, Raving Wind, Original. Chidori, 1000 Birds. Garoga, Double Wolf Fang. Hakusho Kaiten, 8 Trigoms Palm Heavenly Spin. Horatian no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God Technique. Humurasaru, Oblivion partly from FF10. Jinju Konbi Henge Sotaro, Man-Beast Combination Transformation Double-Headed Wolf. Kaiten Gamayu Enden, Fire Release Toad Oil Flame Bullet. Kuchio's no Jutsu, Summoning Technique. Yusa Bakuryu, Desert Avalanche. Sabaku Fuyu, Desert Suspension. Sabaku Taiso, Desert Imperial Funeral. Suten Bakusui Shoha, Water Release Exploding Water Shockwave. Suten Daibakufu no Jutsu, Water Release Great Waterfall Technique. Suten Teppadama, Water Release Gunshot. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Mass Shadow Replication Technique. Yasha Bijutsu Tenbatsu Ano Yo Kyubi, Demonic Arts Wrath of Kyubi, Original. Yasha Kachu, Demonic Maelstrom, Original. Zeshi Nensen, Tongue Tooth Sticky Acid. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.